Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast and to part 2 of the Lisa Bowerman interview. As I said last time, the interview was conducted in 2 separate locations. The second one, being this one, was recorded at the back of the auditorium, so the sound quality might go up and down. Either way, she now talks about her time on Survival and with Big Finish. So now over to me in the past, and I'll speak to you very soon. Be seeing you. Right, so just to bring listeners up to date, we've squirreled Lisa off into a small corner and we're not sinister even remotely. Just to continue the interview, because there was so much we didn't say at the end of the last one, which is why the sound quality will be a bit different. So we covered a lot of your career and didn't mention any Doctor Who whatsoever.
No.
At a Doctor Who convention, it's a bit not cool.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. So now we're going to bore you rigid by going and asking you the same questions you always ask at conventions.
Do it.
First off, you've got the... Everyone knows you as Bernice Summerfield and that kind of thing, but you have got... Well, you were a cheetah person, let's face it. Over to Survival, the last
Karra.
ever broadcast.
Yeah. Right.
A named person.
A named person. I'm Karra, head of the cheetah people. Yeah. It was a funny one. My first telly was Casualty. I did the first 2 series of that. And during the course of that, obviously you work with various directors. And actually, I said earlier on today at the panel I had, I got a phone call with a friend. I was having lunch with a friend from my agent saying, "Do you wear contact lenses?" And that was the only... No, I can if they want me to. And I didn't know what it was for. And she also said, "Do you ride?" And I said, "Yes, I do ride horses." You know? And I got everything happened in a whirl, because I think I got the interview the next day, and it turned out it was directed by Alan Waring, who had, strangely enough, killed me off in Casualty as well. There seemed to be a sort of pattern emerging at some point. And somebody had actually backed out of doing Survival because of the riding, and he didn't want to have a stunt double. He actually wanted the actor who could ride at the same time. So I did actually avoid telling him that the last time I'd ridden, I'd actually had a really bad accident, and my confidence was about 0. I haven't ridden since then. But I went along for the interview, and he was trying to explain to me. So now, are you all right at riding in enclosed situations? I thought, well, that sounds fine. I said yes, whatever. And halfway home from the interview, I thought, what on earth have I said? Everybody always says, don't forget Roy Kinnear, because, the one thing you mustn't lie about when you're gigging for a job is riding, because it's potentially quite dangerous.
Difficult thing,
And I think it was in the days before health and safety and huge insurance bills and all that sort of stuff.
This was the BBC on a BBC budget.
On a Doctor Who 1980s
Just
budget.
be impressed it was a real horse.
Not a model made out of cardboard.
And also,
horse written on the side of it.
Or even dear old Sooty, who was the animatronic cat that didn't really survive very long. Bless him. But that's another story. Anyway, so I got home and my mother said, "What do you mean you said you could?" I said, "Well, I can ride, but I said, do you remember what happened last time?" Anyway, I rang Alan and I said, "Look, I know I said I can ride. I can ride. Don't get me wrong. It's just that, about the galloping and everything." He said, "Well, what do you mean? I was just about to offer you the job." So he said, Tell you what, let's go to the horse place. And there was a very well-known horse wrangler called Reg Dent, who owned the stables up in Rickmansworth, and he supplied all the horses for films and television and stuff. And the horse that I was potentially going to be riding, and was due to ride, was encouragingly called Fury, and was a hugely well-known horse. It had been in Black Beauty, it had been in The Wicked Lady, it had been in Lloyd's Band. It was a star.
So very
this
used
horse
to
was a star.
Being filmed
on
camera.
Was a star, But in fact, poor old Fury was feeling a bit limp because he damaged his hoof on some shoot or something. So I actually got to ride Fury's double. Fury was such a star, he had a double.
I'm thinking Fury of the Deep, but let's not go there.
No. He had a double called Lucky. So I was put on top of Lucky, and I went round the the courtyard a few times and the riding school bit. And I was asked to do various things. And they said, actually, yes, no, she is a good enough rider. We'll put her on Fury. So I went on Fury. There's nothing we can't deal with in a couple of lessons, because they wanted me to sort of neck rein, like Wild West riding which one had. And of course, what you've got to remember is these horses are completely different from your average riding school nags. That they hear turn over, their ears prick up, they hear cut, they stop. I mean, it's as simple as that. They are so well trained. And of course, it then imbues you with the confidence that you need, knowing that you can control,
that they're going to do what you tell them to, effectively.
So cut to the first day, I got the job, obviously, cut to the first day of rehearsals. Actually, having said that, the next hurdle I forgot completely to tell you about was the notorious makeup, which was not the most successful known to man. I think, and as I said earlier in the panel, the problem was the script by Rona Munro was fantastic. It was really good, and the way she described the cheetah people was less cheetah and more. It was much more feral hybrid of a human and a cheetah. It was never meant to look exactly like a cheetah.
It makes sense to the plot as well, because people were devolving or
re-evolving into these vicious animals. And it was a very visceral script. It was really, I don't want to get too poncy about it, but it was a very muscular script, and you could visualise it. It was very well, all the descriptions of when the horses arrive with a kind of rear, and all it is just this sort of ragtag of things that this creature has gathered together, and bits were sort of swaying in the wind when she's standing at the top of the hill. It was all very dramatic. And the reality didn't quite match up to that, because I remember the initial makeup test took 3 hours, over 3 hours. And there was a lot of discussion between the props department and the makeup department about who was going to deal with it. They had these ideas about having latex gloves and retractable claws, and obviously I'd had a head cast, and I'd had the teeth sorted and the eyes and all that sort of stuff.
Once you've had the head cast, you kind of know the job's yours.
Well, it was so quick, because I'd said obviously yes to the job that day, and literally that day they were so behind, I went straight to the place over in West London to have my head cast done. Then I was taken straight to the opticians in London to get the contact lenses done, and then I went straight to there to get the teeth, because I had to have my mouth cast as well for the fangs.
Right.
So it was all very, very quick. And then of course in the old days we had rehearsals, the R word, which you hardly ever get in television now, and the acting rehearsal rooms, which were very well known at the time. It was a wonderful place to work. I used to rehearse in Casualty when it was still a London production. It was we had a great time there, but of course it doesn't really exist anymore. You literally turn up and don't bump into the furniture.
It'll be all right on the night.
Well,
kind of
yeah, it's a bit. I've heard directors say that really it's not terribly fair on actors, because I don't think a lot of people in television production realise quite how much of a contribution the actual acting it is within the context. They go, oh well, that's something we can save on, actors don't need rehearsal. And you go, hang on a minute, what happens if there's something wrong with the script, or the characterisation is something the director doesn't want, or all of those things.
It seems the best you can hope for these days is a read through at most.
Oh, if you're lucky, and I think that's about it. And to be honest, I'm all for spontaneity, and I don't think you should over rehearse things, but when you have absolutely and if you never sometimes you turn up and you never met the actor before.
Yeah.
And I'm not
hi, how do you do? Right, let's act.
Exactly, and I'm not saying you have to play beanbags for 3 hours to kind of get to know each other, because that's a load of rubbish as well. But it's that familiarity with the script that means that you don't have to worry about what the lines are, or the fact that they're giving you amendments 5 minutes before you've gone on set, which has happened to me before. And it's just not fair. You can do it, but because you can do it doesn't make it any better.
No, and now with HD cameras, the slightest, if their chemistry isn't there, it's even more
everything, it's so brutal, it really is. So anyway, cut a long story short, this makeup ended up making it very difficult for any physicality that I wanted to do. Got completely lost. They were obsessed with hiding the neckline of the Willow. And they were obsessed with hiding the neckline, a human neckline. So what happened was you couldn't turn your head. And if you look at cheetahs in the wild, they can virtually turn their head underneath all the way around. It's extraordinary. So you were sort of acting with your shoulders, and then of course they're giving you riding boots as well, because of the riding. But and if you've ever tried running in boots on sand, in a convincing and athletic way, it's never going to happen. And there's this wonderful scene in the final project where there's lots of slow motion running between Ace and Karra. Well, the only reason for that is that I pulled so many muscles, I couldn't run
properly.
I was barely getting up to a limp, and this poor old Land Rover was chugging along in first gear, so the only way to make it look like it was fast was to steer in slow motion. And it's so sad because I could have really done something with it, but it was always going to get lost. The script was good. I will still maintain that the script was good, and I actually don't think the final execution was as bad as... It's so weird how things get reappraised, because at the time, obviously it was the last one that went out, but at the time it was completely derided because, they look rubbish, or this is that. But now
a couple of bad effects will drag everything else down.
But it was only really the Kittling, the poor old thing happened is that Mike Tucker and the guys who I've got to know very well, the visual effects guys, of course, had made this animatronic cat, and of course on the budget he can't do proper animatronics then anyway, but it was still in its infancy, and the director said, how does this work, and pulled its head off.
Oh no.
So the reason it was so jerky is that they had to patch it up because Alan had pulled its head off.
Gosh. And if it had been anybody else,
and it was notoriously known as Sooty. that was its name. So you had that. Do we have to move?
I think I've just been told that we have to be out of here in 10 minutes. But we're all right. We can do it.
Yeah.
It has been derided, but it has been reappraised.
But it has been reappraised because I think people appreciate how much the very new version of it owed to the council estate setting, the whole kind of modern era thing, and I think there is something to be said for that. I really do.
Well, the last 3 years of Doctor Who and that last year really have affected, especially the Matt Smith era as well.
Big style, yeah, I think so.
And it's funny though, because it's a job you do for 2 weeks and you sort of forget about it,
but then it keeps coming back.
Okay, it's the job that never goes away. No. It really is extraordinary.
So you go from the jobbing actress, you've done Doctor.
I
that's
did
it.
Doctor.
It's gone.
Yeah.
How do you go from there to being the archaeologist whose name we love?
Well, it's such a bizarre route, isn't it? I did Keith Barnfather's chap who makes, fan videos for fans, and I took part in a sort of, I suppose, semi-documentary called I Was a Doctor Who Monster, which was funnily enough, all the Doctor Who monsters. And I was interviewed with Sophie by a chap called Gary Russell.
Wow.
And I'd never met him before. I thought he was very good. He was a good interviewer. And I don't know how long after that was. It must have been about a few years after that. I was very good friends with Mike Tucker, and I was having supper over at Mike's, and Mike said, listen, I've been asked whether you might be interested in playing this character called Bernice Summerfield. And he gave me the potted history about the fact she was in the New Adventures and that Virgin Publishing and had lost the rights. But they kept on Bernice Summerfield. And talked about Gary Russell, saying that he was producing, they were setting up this company called Big Finish, and they were producing this exciting ventures on. What happened was that Gary Russell had apparently been having a meal with somebody, and they were talking about ideas for who could play Bernice Summerfield. Of course, originally, I think it was envisaged as Emma Thompson.
Wow, right.
That's who Paul Cornell had in his mind.
His head when he was
writing
it.
But the drawing on the book, the original book, her
was
first ever book.
Jack Rayner. Oh no, it was Jack Rayner for later on.
For later on,
but that Lee Sullivan one. I thought she looked a bit like a Bay City Ripper with
the trousers.
That's dating me. That's it.
Sorry, you're not alone.
But obviously there was a certain image. I don't think they were even looking at that. But what they found out subsequently is that I used to do a lot of radio drama for BBC. I wasn't on the radio rep, but I'd done radio drama. Mike said, "Do you want to play it?" And I went, thinking it was a couple of fanboys and a Casio recorder, thinking, I won't tell me agent. Then it went very quiet. They'd had problems with Virgin for the rights. They got it eventually. Then I was asked to audition, and I thought, all right then. So I went in, and it was at Nick Briggs' flat.
Wow.
With Nick Briggs, Jason Hager and Gary Russell, and I walked into his front room with a microphone strapped to an uplighter in the middle of the room. I thought, oh, bloody hell.
You were absolutely bang on when you thought, this is going to be a Mickey Mouse job.
Exactly. So anyway, the script was from the first one, which subsequently went out, which was Oh No, It Isn't. And I read it, and I thought, okay, I quite like the character, and it was fun to play. And as I've said on several occasions, she just leapt off the page. She knew how to play her. It was very obvious. I didn't hear anything. Then I got the job, and I thought, all right, it'll last 2 weeks. And we went for the very first recording it was in the basement of a place in Elephant and Castle, this run by hippies, and there were lots of sort of flea-ridden cats everywhere. And of course, Nick Courtney was in it. Someone then called Mark Gatiss was in it, and all these people. I'm thinking, crikey, okay. And then the next thing they're saying, oh, now we want to launch you at this convention here, and we want you to do an interview with this magazine here. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, this is meant to be a 2-week job and then it grew and grew, and the first season went out, and as it turned out, as in probably already, is the BBC heard those and then gave the company, because they'd done things the right way, they hadn't tried to get in under the wire. They'd done things properly. They said these were, of course, Alistair Locke, because I'd never done anything post-production before. Everything had been with a spot effects guy in an old-fashioned radio setup, so I'd never done it just as a dry reading with obviously with a certain amount of things have changed since then with all the separate booths, but I'd done a lot of radio drama, so that was fine. With Alistair Locke in the corner with a DAT machine on his thought, I think it's going to sound rubbish. And it didn't. It sounded fantastic. I mean, even if you listen to them now, when it was in its infancy, and this is 15 years ago, it still stands up, even before the digital stuff came out. So they'd done a really good job on it. I mean, I was so surprised. I was delighted, of course. And then, of course, they got the licence to Doctor Who. I thought, that's it. That's the end of Bernice Summerfield. But they, bless her, they kept them on, and 15 years later, I'm still
here you are, still doing it.
Fabulous. Obviously, subsequently, the only other contribution, which is, again, I've got to thank Gary for, was I did a voice for Dreamland, which was the David Tennant animated. That's right. Yeah, so that was, it's weird how this kind of tiny little acorn, and also as a company, Big Finish has grown and grown and grown. And they've had...
Well, you're directing now.
I am. I've been directing for 7 years now.
You have directed stories that you've actually been in.
Yes, quite regularly, because I do the Jago and Litefoot stuff.
So how do you go? What I think you should do, Lisa, do you look in the mirror? Go, I think you should do
this. Is your motivation?
I rely on the guys in the control room, frankly.
Right, well, we're being waved on. Oh, no. Can I just say thank you very much for doing the second part?
That's it. I'm delighted. Nice to meet you, chaps.
Yeah, lovely.
Excellent.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Cheers. Bye.
You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its connected properties are copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. Whostrology, a Time Traveller's Almanac, is available through Telos Publishing or Amazon. Visit www.whostrology.com for further information. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.